so, said the wise Alondo.
Hi there, welcome to Mages and Murderdads, episode number 19. I'm Cameron.
And I'm Danny.
And today we have a very special guest.
Arguably, a person without whom Siege of Dragonspear would not exist.
Elminster himself.
Whoa.
Edward Greenwood.
Whoa.
It's not him.
Neither of those.
It's a guy named Phil Daigle, who is a lead designer for Siege of Dragonspear. Hey!
Yeah.
What a get for this show.
Yeah, I bet. So there are probably like some people listening to the show thinking, "Oh, these rubes, they're never gonna do anything with this podcast." Well, A, we're only one episode away from 20 episodes, so
the big 2-0.
That,
Mm-hmm.
and B, well, we're interviewing the lead designer of a game, like a real game, and what are you doing? You're listening to us interview that lead designer.
We're important.
Yeah.
We're recognized by our peers.
We're a part of the conversation.
We are the conversation.
There you go.
Hashtag the conversation. Hashtag the resistance. Hashtag
Barbarian rhymes.
All right, so but yeah, so we already did the interview. I'm going to edit that in here in just a second, with a little movie magic.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it was a really good interview, don't you?
No, it was really good. We go a lot of places. Some places we expected to go. Other places were a little unexpected. And I think there are a few surprises in here for our list of viewers.
Mm-hmm. And we talk a little bit about Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh, man. But you don't know where. You'll have to listen to the whole thing to figure out where.
Mm-hmm. And, well, I'm not going to tell you what we know or don't know. But we know or do not know something.
Yeah. And so we're gonna lead on into the thing, but what should people do when they listen to this podcast? What are the plugs that you have to make? When you make
Go down to the
show?
description. Click the link to go to Facebook. Like us on Facebook. Go down to the description. Click the link to go to my Twitter and to Danny's Twitter. Follow us both. You can go to the Patreon to support the show. If you like this show and like what we do, you can support us for $1 a month. That would really help us out. The theme song is by Brian Taylor. This is the last episode where Brian Taylor's theme song is in it. There's a new theme song for the next episode. At Silverskinned on Twitter did our little portraits. Those might change sometime in the future. I actually don't know yet, but that could occur. But for right now, that. And that's it. That's all the stuff they could do. Oh, like and subscribe here on YouTube, of course.
Yeah, and here's the interview.
Let's listen to it. So Phil, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Here at Mages and Murderdads, still probably the only Baldur's Gate podcast that we still refuse to Google.
Yeah, why?
Well, why ask a question you're not going to like the answer to?
Exactly. I feel like you belong on the show already. And so I guess let's start with really, really big questions. Why did you make Siege of Dragonspear?
Why did we make Siege of Dragonspear? That's a very good question. Mm-hmm. So many, many years ago, we had decided that we definitely wanted to bring Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, and eventually Icewind Dale, et cetera, to the iPad. And in the course of doing that, we had to update it for desktops as well, because the game had been, it was so out of date at this point that it was kind of a pain to play. There were mods out there that could fix it up, but it wasn't a very pleasant experience. And so we said, okay, we're going to fix it up, get it on iPad, it'll be great. And in the development of it, we realized that people, they love Baldur's Gate, but it's hard for them to come back to a game they've already played unless there's new content. So very quickly we realized, hey, you know what? We need to produce some additional new content for these games. And that's where, Nira, Dorn, Rasad, those characters came out of the enhanced editions. And then in Baldur's Gate 2, we added Hexat and a few other fun adventures. We did the Black Pits 1 and 2. And we had generally just been adding a lot of new, fresh content to the game to make fans of Baldur's Gate enticed to come back and play it again. And the entire time we were working on those things, we were like, you know what we would love to do is BG 1.5, which is basically something that can bridge the gap between Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2. And we didn't really have any plans beyond, we want to do a connecting adventure that's really cool and fun. But for the first while, it was kind of just a loose idea. And towards the end of Baldur's Gate 2 Enhanced Edition, we realized, hey, you know what? We're kind of in the perfect position to start thinking about this more seriously. So we kind of cranked up our plans and started development on it.
Cool. So, yeah, I wanted to ask you about kind of the time frame you chose to kind of put Siege of Dragonspear, because it's a pretty tight time frame between the end of Baldur's Gate 1 and the very beginning of Baldur's Gate 2. Did you feel constrained by that time frame, or did you appreciate the kind of structure that gave the team?
It was constraining at first, definitely. This is always going to be the case when you're doing a prequel, in that you know what the outcome is. You have to reach a certain target, and we were under even greater constraints because it was both a sequel and a prequel. So we knew we had to start in one end, and we knew we had to end at one end, and we had to build some manner of pipe that could reach those 2 points while also going on an interesting journey on its own. And initially, Dragonspear Castle was just kind of thrown out there as, hey, this is a location close to Baldur's Gate. Surely we could have a fun adventure here. And eventually we found a way to make it work. But it was tough at first because it's like everyone knows what happens. You end up in Irenicus's dungeon. Spoiler alert in case you haven't played Baldur's Gate 2. Sorry, guys.
We're going to get there.
You know what? I would recommend it. Wait for a sale. It's been out for a while. You could probably get it at a good price.
Yeah, we don't want to overextend our limited Baldur's Gate capital.
Yeah, it's something you can only take so much of. But that's kind of the story. I mean, it was a constraint, but we couldn't really think of a better place to fit in a new adventure. You could argue that it's possible to fit an adventure into BG2 between the main campaign and Throne of Ball, because there's sort of a vague period of time between when you're a guest of Sultan SLR and when you have to run off to the south. But we felt that the gap between BG1 and 2 was a lot more enticing. There were a lot more loose threads, per se. So while it was a tight squeeze, I really wouldn't have wanted to do another Baldur's Gate story anywhere else.
Yeah, so how do you make a decision about those threads from the end of Baldur's Gate 1, right? Because, clearly you have to make some choices about which characters come through, which ones are new, right? Like who gets to continue their story.
Yeah, and that was a long challenge throughout the life of the project. A lot of that was driven by which voice actors could we get back? Because we had tried out, hey, let's bring back Jaheira, and her voice actress was gone. She was no longer working in the industry. And we were like, all right, you know what, let's get a sound alike. Let's see what that sounds like. And it was close, but it wasn't Jaheira, so you're kind of like, this would be more disappointing than anything else. Jaheira actually did make it into the game because we had to have her, but we decided it would be better not to use a sound alike than try and risk mutilating her voice, for lack of a better term. For everyone else, we went by voice actors. So Khalid, we were able to get Jim Meskimen back, so we had Khalid in the game, definitely. There were a couple other characters we couldn't get the voice actors back. Safana wasn't the original voice actress, but in her case, the voice actress was so identical to the original that we decided to risk it. So I'm kind of contradicting myself a little bit here, but for the most part, it was driven by what voice actors were available.
Yeah, it's interesting that about the kind of industry constraint stuff to that. What was the dev timeline for Siege of Dragonspear? How long did you have to work on it?
Oh Lord, let me think about this for a while. So the initial inception started way back when we were developing Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition. So this would have been 2011, 2012, around there. Mm-hmm. And then it was kind of backburnered until towards the end of BG2. So we're probably looking at ramping up Siege. It would have been around the end of 2013. So towards the end of 2013, all of 2014, and all of 2015, and a big chunk of 2016, we were working on Siege, but the team sort of slowly grew. So for those first 12 months or whatever, there was only a small handful of people working on it at any given time. And then the last year of development was kind of all hands on deck. We brought everyone in Beamdog over to help finish it off.
Cool. And So earlier you were mentioning when you were thinking about, okay, we have this certain amount of time we need this story to happen, and you were thinking about like places, and you said relatively early on Dragonspear Castle came up. Were there any other locations that were thrown around or kind of big story hooks initially?
Oh yeah. Let's go through them all.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
awesome.
Let's do that. Yeah. Let me bring up my map of the Sword Coast here. Oh no, this is what I love doing is just coming up with, hey, wouldn't it be great to do a game in this location?
If we had video, we would see a giant, like a deerskin pelt map being unrolled.
Oh man. Every time we take photos of our office, we have to blur out so much because we have these giant maps on the wall. But all right, I got my map up here. So north of Baldur's Gate is kind of where we had been considering for the most part. And originally, Siege of Dragonspear was much larger than it ended up being. Blue skies and all, you plan for the coolest thing imaginable, then you scale back from there. And so we were thinking of taking you to like Orlambar, which has a trading company run by a dragon. Warlock's Crypt is right around there, which is where Larlock lives. He's that famous lich in the Forgotten Realms that is always causing trouble for people. The High Moor also has tons of stuff. There's a huge amount of history for the High Moor going back all the way to the time of the Netherese, I believe. The Serpent Hills. We were even going to have a section in Subar, I believe, which is just to the east of Baldur's Gate. But in the end, we had to scale back the plans a little bit. But yeah, we would have loved to do everything south of Daggerford, but north of Baldur's Gate, essentially.
Basically, the north of that would have been off limits. That's kind of in Icewind Dale territory, I guess.
So once you get past Daggerford, you're heading into Waterdeep, and it's like, well, if we're going to get 5 feet away from Waterdeep and not actually go into the city, that's kind of a kick in the pants.
Yeah.
So you're a big lore nerd. Like, I'm getting a feeling.
To an extent. So, like, I'm going to admit that I have read very few D&D novels, but I've played the games, like, a silly amount, and I've played a ton of tabletop, and I've read a lot of the source books and whatnot. So if you're asking me, like, hey, what did Elminster do when his daughter gave him that shard and he put it in his hand, I would be like, I don't know. But if you want to ask me about the history of the Sword Coast, I will do slightly better.
You're the guy. You're the history of the Sword Coast guy. Well, look, we both read... Well, no, I take that back. Only I read an Elminster novel in preparation for a previous episode, and I have no interest in ever doing that again.
It was
That's
reoccurring. It was a reoccurring little section in each podcast, and it made it all of one season. We made it through part of Baldur's Gate with that little section.
Did you, you know what you guys should do instead of just general D&D novels is you should read the novelizations of the Baldur's Gate series.
So I have read those, and or at least the first one, and they are fascinating because I remember Khalid being just ruthlessly murdered right in the middle of Baldur's Gate 1.
And who can forget Minsk with his fiery red hair?
Yeah, I've always
that's
read.
what we all know him for.
Yeah, maybe you can shed some light on this, but I've always, kind of internet forum knowledge, whatever, heard that the writer for that book had a kind of like some pre-story notes, some script notes, basically from the game, and not the full game. Do you have any?
I don't know the exact details, but I do know that it was. It was. I'm pretty sure it was towards the end of the development of the game, and it wouldn't have been final. And you're probably right. Honestly, it was probably just working notes from an early draft of the story, but that still doesn't explain BG2. I guess if you want to maintain consistency between the books, that's fair. But
It's its own pocket dimension.
there you go. It's a pocket plane where Minsk has fiery red hair. I think that's fair.
Yeah, that's my personal canon. That's my head canon.
So I mean, you guys are BG fans. You're probably on the up and up about Minsk's history.
I feel like we were relatively casual. We had a casual understanding of Minsk's history, and I feel like Siege of Dragonspear actually fleshed a lot of that out for us in terms of meeting that other pair from What was the region they're from?
Rashomon, I think.
Rashomon, yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of meeting those other folks and kind of getting a little bit of a feel for that culture, but is there something else we're missing?
I could tell you the origin of Minsk, but just as a quick aside, I really loved that quest. I was a little worried initially that it would come across as super cheesy because it's like, you meet the reverse of Minsk and Dinah here. But actually seeing how it was handled, I was really pleased to see it. And yeah, like I thought it was really, really cool to meet basically the female version of Minsk and see the male version of Dinah here and see that really interesting history of Rashomon. But Minsk, I'm sure you know that Minsk was originally an actual D&D character by Cameron Topher way, way back in the day when he was playing a campaign with, I think, James Olin.
No, I don't know that. Please continue.
Oh, man. Okay.
Fill this whole thing out, yeah.
The story of Baldur's Gate, like the characters of Sarevok, Minsk, a few others, they all were derived from an actual D&D campaign that was played up in Grande Prairie, Alberta. So 4 hours north of Edmonton, and Edmonton is already pretty damn north. There's this tiny town called Grande Prairie, and it's got a regional college that for some reason churns out these incredibly successful computing science grads. So way back in the mid-90s, there was this crew of nerds up in GP playing D&D, and that's the origin of Baldur's Gate. I'm pretty sure it was James Olen, he was their DM, and Sarevok was a party member, Minsk was a party member, and Edwin was a party member, and a few others, and they had these crazy adventures. And then when that group sort of slowly got hired by BioWare and melted away down to Edmonton, eventually they're like, hey, James, you want to come make a game with us? And he did, and he brought his story, and that's how they started building Baldur's Gate.
Oh, wow. So was it just the characters, or were there like plot pieces and kind of locations that were filled in from this real-life campaign?
It was largely the characters, but their personalities, that's where they originated from. So Minsk, Cam kept requesting like these ridiculous familiars, and the DM was like, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. And he had set Minsk's intelligence so low that he was basically a handicapped person. Like he wasn't able to converse with anyone. He couldn't functionally do anything. And so Cam was like, well, my guy is super dumb, and he constantly gets knocked out in the first round of combat because he's got super low hit points. So eventually he talked James into giving him a familiar, which was a miniature giant space hamster. Because he kept like throwing familiars at him. It's like, can I have this? No. Can I have this? No. Can I have this? Can I have a space hamster? No. Can I have a miniature space hamster? All right. So eventually that's how he got Minsk. And so what would happen is that Minsk had all the intelligence points, and when Boo would get all the intelligence points. And when Minsk would immediately go down in combat in the first round, then Boo would run around doing things on behalf of Minsk, which is kind of where, Go for the Eyes came from. But the important thing to remember is that Boo is not super intelligent. He's always just been a hamster.
So don't worry about him.
That's too good. And that also
really good.
That also reminds me of a conversation we had relatively early on in the podcast talking about what if this Baldur's Gate game we were playing was an actual campaign and we were in it. And it's funny to see that like that's actually kind of the origin. So that hypothetical we ran more or less made sense.
Yeah. It was really interesting to hear the story because I had no idea that was the case. But yeah, Cam is one of the founders of Beamdog, so he goes way back. And in fact, he requested to review all of Minsk's new lines to make sure that they were in character. So he was quite happy to come back to Minsk after, 20 years more.
Yeah, you don't want to ruin that intellectual property.
Exactly. Well, they've got the comics now. Mm-hmm. Have you seen those? He's got his own adventure series.
I think I did know that. I've read some reviews of it. I haven't actually read the comic.
I think it's called Murder in Baldur's Gate.
I gotta write it down. I'm writing it down right now.
Sounds appropriate. There's a lot of
that. That was a module they released, but I'm pretty sure Murder in Baldur's Gate connects into the Minsk comic. But it was really cool to see. the way they brought him forward is really clever. So Baldur's Gate takes place around 150 some odd years before current 5th edition D&D.
Mm-hmm.
And, Minsk is a human, so obviously he can't live for a super long time. But what they did was he was turned to stone, and in the center of Baldur's Gate, there was this statue of Minsk that was actually him. And at the beginning of the comic series, a wild mage accidentally casts stone to flesh and brings it back to life.
Oh, and then he just goes around swinging a two-handed sword.
Initially, he thinks that the person who rescued him is Nira from the Enhanced Edition. And I didn't know WotC was going to use her, and I was quite excited because she was one of my creations.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's not Nira, however. It's a person who looks similar to her because it's been 150 years.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he very quickly goes back into his old ways of kicking butts for goodness and rooting out evil where he finds it.
Yeah, I guess that kind of brings up another question we wanted to ask. What is the relationship between Beamdog as a story-generating design entity of its own and Wizards of the Coast? I mean, do they have kind of final say over what you're doing, or is it a conversation?
It's both. So they own the intellectual property, so ultimately it's their call. If they don't want us doing something, we're not going to do it. And if they want us to change something, we're going to do it. But at the same time, they're not deeply controlling. They want us to drive the ship. They want us to come at them with cool ideas, and then they can just say, yeah, let's do it. Or, you know what? No, we can't actually do that. We have an absurdly close relationship with Wizards of the Coast. I've seen other game companies' relationships with their IP holders and publishers, and you kind of keep them at a distance because you don't want them to see how the sausage gets made. But that's not really the relationship Wizards and Beamdog have. They have direct access to our in-development artwork, all of our files, that sort of thing. When we produce new game builds, they just automatically get them. So we show them everything. We loop them in early in all of our processes. We're actually working with them right now for a quite big thing. Unfortunately, I can't reveal it, but we work so close in hand. It's kind of weird, honestly. Not a lot of companies will be this close. And from the stories that I've been told about, way back in the day when, say, Neverwinter Nights was under development, Wizards is essentially a completely different company. They're very open. They're very collaborative. So if I had to choose another IP holder to work with, it would be rough because I'm so used to this kind of relaxed relationship that we have.
Yeah, it seems like a really they seem like a really positive and kind of kind parent company in some ways. I mean, I've written about Wizard stuff quite a bit, and that's how we ended up setting this interview up. Is I've interviewed a bunch of people over there for journalism stuff. So, yeah.
I mean, if you look at what Wizards does, I mean, they produce Dungeons and Dragons and they produce Magic the Gathering, and both of those are extremely social games. And so I think they realize that they need to have that attitude of being, just easy to work with.
Yeah.
And we love it. I wouldn't have a different partner.
It is very appropriate that this is that we're recording this on Valentine's Day.
Aw.
Oh right, crap.
Wizards of the Coast.
No.
Guys, we're going to have to wrap this up in about 20 minutes.
Well, Wizards of the Coast is your Valentine, so I think it's probably fine.
I think I could convince my girlfriend of that. I think I could swing that.
Mm-hmm. It's just Drizzt Do'Urden and you in a little heart.
Mm-hmm.
It's like being married to the sea. I'm married to the wizard, baby.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk favorites. You want to talk favorites?
That'd be fun. So I've got a lot of favorites when it comes to Siege of Dragonspear. And I was wondering, what's your favorite side quest in that game?
Favorite side quest? Well, I already kind of went into how much I enjoyed the conversation with the sort of alternate Minsk and Dinah here. Aside from that, it's hard to say. I was a big fan of the Lich Outpost in the first sort of outdoor exploration map on the right-hand side. There's that little mining tunnel that you can get into that broke into the sort of Lich laboratory.
Oh yeah, the Dwarves of Dumathoin, right?
Yeah, and I always thought that was just a fun little classic Baldur's Gate, adventure that you can run off and do your own thing. But what really made it cool in my eye was the scrying scene, how you could gather the regents together and then spy on people in the game. And I always thought that was a really cool and very D&D thing to do.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that, and I think I think that there was one scene in particular where you get to scry on the hooded figure. And being able to get that much more information about, spoiler alert, Irenicus, was really neat. And I thought that I just thought that was a really fun addition, and it gave you some experience too. So there was also like a metagame incentive. Yeah.
As a quick aside, the inclusion of Irenicus in the plot was actually a pretty late addition. We didn't think that it would be possible to get the voice actor who did Irenicus, David Warner, and then it turned out that he was actually available, and so we had to scramble to find a way to make it work. And so towards the end, I was like, wait a minute, what if we set it up so that he's testing the player character? And that actually ended up strengthening the plot quite a bit. There were alternate versions of the plot when he wasn't present, but I think the version we went with was the strongest one we could have done.
Yeah, I guess I have a question then about Elminster, right? Elminster shows up a couple times in Baldur's Gate 1 and drops out. And then we have an evil wizard in Irenicus who shows up a whole lot. Did you ever think about those two in relationship to one another? Was there ever any idea of maybe bringing Elminster back into the plot or anything like that?
Yeah, and we had actually talked about that. We had actually, I think, even written up a couple test scenes with Elminster, and we weren't terribly enthusiastic about how it was turning out, and I don't think Wizards was terribly interested in having Elminster come back. So we had briefly thought about it, but in the end we decided to just back off from the idea. But there is definitely a parallel there. Elminster doesn't really encounter you a lot in BG1, but that is actually one of the scenes that I wanted to sort of emulate in Siege of Dragonspear over and over again. Is you're wandering around and this mysterious figure approaches you in this place that you've arrived in, and he seems to know a lot about you. And yeah, so we did think about that, but Elminster was not. He didn't make it into the game.
He's deeply sad. He's hanging out with.
He can cast a spell that'll make himself happy. The guy's got skills.
I just remember back in the day reading, I think maybe issues of Dungeon magazine and or maybe Dragon, one of the two, where Ed Greenwood would occasionally write these first-person narrative bits that also included pieces of Forgotten Realms lore in them. And they would always open with Ed Greenwood looks out the window and there's Elminster sitting on a rock, hanging out, smoking a pipe. And then they're super best bros for a while. And I've always thought that Elminster is a super strange kind of creeper dude who just shows up out of nowhere and wants to hang out.
That's the best kind of wizard, the one that just appears out of nowhere wanting to hang out.
With his pipe. That's,
exactly.
Of course, deeply critical. So can we talk about encounter design? That super cool crowd pleaser encounter design philosophy. So go ahead. I'll let you.
I was gonna say. I mean, I didn't directly do most of the encounters. I mean, I can talk about them, but actually, it was Alex Tomovic who was our encounter specialist. He was a giant, massive fan of Icewind Dale and how they had done their encounter style. And so he kind of ported that system over to Baldur's Gate, and it actually ended up working out quite well.
Yeah, I think early on when we were playing this, there's definitely a very different feel from throughout BG1 into Siege of Dragonspear. And it's interesting that you talk about Icewind Dale, because when Kunzman and I were trying to compare what the encounters felt like, we kind of were drawing parallels between, Baldur's Gate 1 feels very much like kind of a second edition, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, a very Gygaxian feel to it. There's going to be a pit, in a dungeon, and that pit's going to have like one slime, and that slime isn't necessarily like a threat to anybody, but that's just that's the fauna
It's just
of
how the dungeon is, man.
of the dungeon. Whereas the encounters in Siege of Dragonspear felt more like 4E, 5E, or even like tighter like CR rating 3rd edition, where these encounters are actually meant to challenge the player, and you have to tactically engage with them in order to succeed. Was there kind of that feel to it?
Yeah, exactly that. So the pillars of a solid Baldur's Gate game are exploration, conversation, combat, and companions. So those 4 things, if you really nail them, then you're going to have a strong chance at really nailing Baldur's Gate. In the case of Siege, however, we didn't really have a lot of opportunities for exploration. You'll note that the adventure is fairly linear, and there's not a lot of backtracking, and there's not a lot of just pick a direction and wander in that direction and find something to do. So we knew that we had to really amp up the other pillars in order to compensate, and that's kind of where the combat design came out of. We knew that we had to really provide a solid game to bite into in lieu of having a large amount of content to explore.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I think, so talking about, there was, I think, at least 1 or 2 chapters where I felt my exploration muscles kind of getting a workout. And I think one in particular, I think it was chapter 10. It was this really sprawling chapter where, that was the chapter where you had to go underneath Dragonspear Castle to plant the explosive. And so under there were like, it was some real just like Dungeons and Dragons-esque stuff in those caves. There were drow down there. There were like several different side quests. You had a lot of like intersection.
That whole area is directly inspired by the Underdark from Baldur's Gate 2. That's one of my favorite areas in the entire series. Probably in all of role-playing games, the Underdark in BG2 is one of my favorite areas. And I wanted to not necessarily capture the exact same feeling, but a similar one of just there's danger in every direction, and it feels like I'm in an extremely bad place. When I went into the Underdark in BG2, it was like being in Berlin during World War II as a spy or something, right? Like you look around, there's Nazis everywhere. It's heart pounding, and I wanted to sort of capture the same feel in the Underground River. And I think that in the end, when the team put everything together, it was a long time coming, and it's a very dense area with a lot of content. But in the end, I think they really delivered on that idea.
Yeah, and the structure of that chapter, I think, is really interesting, too. I mean, you're kind of talking about big design pillars. Was the idea that you could kind of go into the camp, into the Crusader camp, and kind of interact with them as normal NPCs? Like, how far, or how early in development did that appear? Was that like a big...
That one, so being able to go into the enemy camp actually was, again, another fairly late addition, probably around the same time that we decided we could work David Warner, Irenicus into the story. So we had set it up. Chapter 10 was essentially supposed to be like our version of Chapter 2 in Baldur's Gate 2, where your objective is get a lot of money, and there's just an insane amount of content. And we had to scale back some of our plans for that, but it's still a very wide open chapter. And we had gotten to the point where you could visit the entrance of the castle, but you couldn't go in. And in testing, it was like, you know what? There's so much cool stuff here, but when I show up at the castle, I'm like, Jesus, I wish I could spy and just pretend to be someone else and get in there. And we realized it wouldn't have been a ton of effort to add it, so we said, all right, let's do it. And we ended up designing a whole segment.
Gotcha. Wow. So
yeah, that's really cool. I think personally, I think chapters 10 is just like some of the highlights for me in the game. There's just so much content there, and a lot of it is just really cool.
Yeah. So Danny, do you have any other big? I think we've worked our way through our list of questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're obligated to ask this final one. You want to do the honors, Consulman?
No, you can do it.
Yeah, so Baldur's Gate 3 is this a thing?
Is he gone? Did he disappear? Did he run away?
I think he's still
Hello,
on.
hello.
Oh,
There we go.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah,
There he
cool.
is.
I was about to reveal everything, and then a hand belonging to Trent just gripped me by the throat.
Oh,
and I fell
man.
off the ground. No, I can't say anything about that particular thing. I can tell you that. Actually, no, I won't say anything. I'll get in trouble otherwise.
Well, let's say that it is not a thing. Would you want to do it?
I think, honestly, yes. I would love to do Baldur's Gate 3, but at the same time, if you really think about Baldur's Gate 3, like, let me ask you this. What do you think Baldur's Gate 3 should be?
A city builder game in which you apply very good roguelike elements to attack. No, none of that. I don't know. It would be
A bullet hell game. A bullet hell
bullet
game
hell
where you're
game.
Elminster and you just are constantly going right. No, not that either.
So, all right, now if I were to go back to 2007 and I were to ask you, hey, what should Fallout 3 be? What would you say? Would you say first-person shooter?
No, I would say a bullet hell game where you're Elminster. And yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of the challenge, right? Like, let's say you're going to make a Baldur's Gate 3. Do you make it an isometric game in the style of the originals, or do you try and do something a little more extreme? Do you go first person? Do you make it more like Oblivion? Do you make it, an over-the-shoulder sort of a chase cam sort of thing? And I think a lot of people are expecting it to be isometric. I think a lot of people are expecting it to be something new. And I think that no matter what you do, you're going to end up disappointing a lot of people. I would love to be completely wrong about that. Maybe, BG3 will get made and it'll be exactly what everyone wants. But, it's something to think about. If Baldur's Gate 3 were to come, maybe it wouldn't be the game that you're expecting. And I would love to work on an isometric Baldur's Gate 3. Let me just put that out there. I think that would be super duper fun. But who knows what ends up getting made.
That's some real hooded figure dialogue there.
I'm not saying anything, man. I'm not saying that it's in production or anything. I'm just saying that there's a lot of competing visions for what it could be, basically.
You might as well just be putting on a hood and stepping out of the shadows and mean mugging us, talking about how we haven't lived up to our destiny, and then disappearing.
Sorry, man, you're not ready. You're not ready for Baldur's Gate 3 yet.
I mean, it's interesting that you say that. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I'm not. I think I can talk about this. So I'm playing the new Torment game for review right now. For Paste Magazine, Paste Games. Go to Paste Games, and I feel a very similar way, right? Like it's meant to be a spiritual successor, of course, to Planescape Torment. Kind of in the DNA of the Baldur's Gate stuff, and there are notes of that it is hitting very well, and there are notes that it isn't, and one can imagine a world in which they weren't so attentive to the very particular form of that game, and it was a little more interesting or a little more compelling. Although that game is very good, I don't want to say that it isn't.
Yeah, and if a BG3 comes out that's different, I don't want to be preemptively saying it's not what people are expecting. I guess ultimately what I'm saying is I would love to work on Baldur's Gate 3, but I worry it would be very constraining in a way.
Yeah. And having done Siege of Dragonspear within some very tight constraints, I imagine you have a good idea.
I'm ready
about
for vacation.
Soon. It's got to be soon, though, right?
We've got something in the pipe. You'll hear from us in the near future.
Ooh.
But I'll be good, and I won't reveal it ahead of time.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Neutral good. Or that's lawful good, I guess. That might be lawful neutral.
Well, I mean, if I'm intentionally torturing you with tidbits of information, is that lawful good?
Yes, a paladin would say yes.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, yeah. Danny, do you have any closers?
No, I think that's it. I do think it's interesting. I haven't really thought about Baldur's Gate 3 in that respect, but you saying that it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you do your best to try to make it as close as possible to BG2, when you do miss and when it is a little off, it's only going to stand out more. And if you try to make it something transformational where it's really that kind of shift from Fallout 2 to 3, then
Yeah.
you're going to have like a bunch of people angry that it's not the exact same thing. So I haven't really thought about that, but I could totally see the tension there.
And you know what? Like Fallout 3, now obviously it was clearly the right decision, but for a long time it wasn't entirely clear that they had successfully recaptured Fallout. And in the end, they did, but it was kind of touch and go there for a while, so it can be scary.
It's kind of one of those things where history just has to judge you after one of those things.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, I think after playing Siege, it was just a really fun time. It was a really fun game.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that.
And we had a really fun time. It was definitely, I do think that the encounter design, like that shift from BG1, and we felt very much like we were kind of coasting on a Baldur's Gate on core rules. And when we got to that first dungeon, and I remember Kunzelman saying, "Damn, all Saravok had to do was get some of those fire beetles next to him, and we would have never killed him."
Yeah, that's still
fair.
true.
The curse of continually more powerful video game enemies.
Yeah. Well, Phil, thank you so much for
thank you for
doing
having me.
this
This
with
was
us.
great.
Yeah, and absolutely. And when we're done, sometime in like 2020 with Baldur's Gate 2, maybe we'll have you back on just to chat about Baldur's Gate 2, just because it's fun.
I very much look forward to it.
Awesome.
Excellent.
All right, thanks so much.
All right, thanks for having me on, guys, and I hope you have a great Valentine's Day.
Oh yeah, you too.
Thanks so
Tell
much.
Drizzt Doerden that I said hello.
He's waiting at home.
What a great interview.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Yeah. So thanks to Phil Daigle for doing that. Hopefully we'll have him on again to just maybe for more talk about Minsk. I think I learned more about Minsk in that conversation than I ever investigated before.
I mean, this guy went deep on Forgotten Realms like geography and lore. I feel like we can go back to that well many times. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm deeply excited about it. Do you have a favorite part of the interview that you really liked?
I think
a thing that you learned?
I think that my favorite part was him talking about kind of Chapter 10 and the inspiration being Drow in Baldur's Gate 2. And that's something that our Lissa viewers can look forward to, because guess what we're doing next episode?
What are we doing?
We're going to start playing Baldur's Gate 2.
Baldur's Gate 2 Enhanced Edition. If you want to play along with us, the next episode will just be Irenicus's dungeon. That classic zone. If you don't know what that is, you're going to find out, since some of that was spoiled for you already in this episode.
Yeah, the interview talked about some things, but when you're talking to a big shot lead developer, you can't keep up the no spoils policy. You know how it goes.
I mean, I did close my ears and my eyes, and I just yelled, no, 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 no. I did edit that out.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness. It went on for 2, 3, 4 minutes. All right, well, do all the things I said at the beginning of the episode. Click all the links in the description to follow us on various different sources. You can support us on Patreon. That's the most helpful thing you can do for this entire episode. If you like listening to this bi-weekly, or sometimes weekly, that our Tazok Smiting episode, or Danny's Tazok Smiting episode, did really well. People seem to really like that.
Yeah, I think people just had a bloodlust for Tazok. But yeah, really the best thing you can do is just like, if you have Google Chrome, just hold Control and click on all of the links in the video's description, and then just like always have those in your browser, just 100% of the time.
Yeah. Yep. And then we'll be back in 2 weeks with the first episode of Baldur's Gate 2 with a new theme song by John Fio.
I can't wait.
Maybe I'll put it right here. I'll probably put it right here.
Ooh.
At the end. All right. 2 weeks.
See you guys.
Goodbye.